Hi there, my name is Dimitris Charalambidis, and in this video, we'll talk about the absolute value equations. And since we'll talk about the absolute value equations, we cannot understand how to solve any of them unless we actually realize what an absolute value is. So let's quickly begin with that. Absolute value of a number x. First of all, we should know that the absolute value of a number is notated by placing that number between two such perpendicular lines. For instance, the absolute value of 3 would be notated by this, the absolute value of -5 could be notated by that, the absolute value of 1/2 could be notated by that, and so on. Now, we know, or at least we should have known, that we have a number line on which all numbers can be placed. In the middle of that line, we have number 0. At the right of 0, we have positives. At the left, we have negatives. Any number can be placed on that number line. Assuming that, let's say we have number 6 over here, we define as absolute value of 6 the distance between 0 and 6. So absolute value of 6 is distance between 6 and 0. Similarly, if we use another negative, this time -8, it's already placed at the left of 0. Again, by absolute value of -8, we define the distance between -8 and 0. So again, absolute value of 8 is distance between -8 and 0. So if you noticed, I keep using a kind of keyword, the word distance. And that's because that's what an absolute value really is. In general, in order to generalize everything, in general, from now on, we should keep in mind that the absolute value of a random number x will always define the distance between x and 0. Another interesting thing now regarding that definition and regarding the word distance is that the distance itself, as in real life, can only be greater or, in the worst scenario, equal to 0. We cannot have negative distances. Okay, so this means that for any number x, its absolute value, since it stands for distance, should always be greater or equal than 0. And this is the key concept that we should keep with regards to the absolute value. Absolute value of a number is the distance between that number and number 0, and it's always greater or at least equal to 0. In any case, never negative. Now, let's try to work out some easy equations that do include absolute value ones. And let's start with some examples. Solve absolute value of x equals 3. As we keep saying, whether you know me in person or through my videos, we always need to realize that math is a language itself. So when we write something in math, we should always be able to interpret it in sentences, in wording. Absolute value of x equals 3 means find a number, the distance of which from 0, because that's what absolute value stands for, is 3. If we now use a number line for that, we can easily see how many cases do we have, how many numbers are there, the distance of which from 0 is 3. Well, let's start from 0 and let's move 3 units to the right. I would meet number 3. And let's do the same process, but this time to the left. I would meet number -3. So this means that given the absolute value of x equals 3, I would have to take 2 different cases. Either x equals 3 or x is -3. And that's the answer. That's the solution to that. In general now, let's generalize that again. In general, absolute value of x equals to a positive quantity theta means that either x is theta or x is negative theta. And be careful that we just used the expression inside the absolute value, and we'll do some examples together. For example, absolute value of x is 10. Like we saw before, x should be 10 or x should be -10. Absolute value of x is 5. I prefer to express everything vertically. X is 5 or x is -5. I just applied directly the definition. Whenever we're given an absolute value of something equals to something positive, we get the something inside the signs of the absolute value, and we make that either with that positive or with its negative. And remember, it's about these somethings. So even if I have x minus 1 equals 3, I will not just take the x. Look, a common mistake. Common mistake. I'm not going to just lose the brackets, but I'm going to consider, let's forget that, I will take the expression between the absolute values. So I'm going to use all that, and I'm going to say that all this can either be 3 or all that can either be -3. And now I will solve each one of these cases separately. X equals 3 plus 1, which leads to x equals 4. X equals -3 plus 1, which leads to x equals -2. Another one, absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals 10. Again, we should just use the expression inside the absolute values. And once we will make that equal to the positive number, and in a second case, we will do that equal to the negative. 2x equals 10 plus 3, which means 2x is 13, which means x equals 13 over 2, or 2x equals -10 plus 3, 2x is -7, x equals -7 over 2. Another one, absolute value of x plus 1 over 3 equals 6. We don't care. Regardless of the expression inside the absolute value, we should simply take that expression and make that once equal to the positive result or equal to the negative result. Then it's up to us to solve each case separately. Here, for instance, I would say that, you know what, I can start with a cross multiplication. X plus 1 equals 6 times 3. X plus 1 equals 18. X equals 17. Or x plus 1 equals -18. X equals -19. And these would be the solutions. Remember again, absolute value of anything equals to a number. That anything can be that number, or that anything can be the opposite of that number, which makes sense in the second case. We will only work with 3 easy cases on this video, and there will be another video on more complex ones. Absolute value of x is 0. First of all, we've said that the absolute value can actually be the smallest, the least number that an absolute value could be is 0. So this equation here makes sense. If we want to explain everything in words, that equation would mean, let's find the number x, the distance of which from 0 is 0. Hold on. How can I find a number so that its distance from 0 is 0? This only means that that number I'm looking for is number 0 itself. So absolute value of x equals 0 leads on to only one case, x being equal to 0. And again, this concept works as in symbols. For instance, absolute value of x minus 1 equals 0. Again, we should take the expression between the absolute values and make that equal to 0. So x minus 1 is 0, which means that x equals 1. Absolute value of 3x minus 9 is 0. Again, I should simply keep the expressions inside the absolute value. So 3x minus 9 equals 0, which means that 3x equals 9, which means that x equals 3. Absolute value of x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Once again, regardless of the expression inside the absolute value, once we're given that the absolute value of something equals 0, the only solution can be taken by taking that something and making that equal to 0. So x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. We should be able to recognize that as a quadratic, and we know that this can be solved by the discriminant formula. 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6, 25 minus 24 equals 1. x1, comma 2 is minus b plus minus root of b over 2a, minus 5 plus minus root of 1 over 2 times 1, minus 5 plus minus 1 over 2. Eventually, minus 5 plus 1 over 2 should be negative 2. Minus 5 minus 1 over 2 should be negative 3. And finally, we have the case of an absolute value being equal to something negative. Let's take a moment, because I hate seeing in anyone doing the exactly same thing that she just learned. It's not, math doesn't come without thinking. We shouldn't be trained to be robots and see absolute value of x is something, so it should be that something or its opposite. We should always think, how did we start this video? We defined the absolute value. What did we say about the absolute value? We've said that the absolute value of a number is the distance of that number from 0. By distance, we only mean positive numbers. I cannot get up from my chair and do a distance of negative 3 meters in any direction. Okay, so this only means that since the absolute value is distance, and since distance can only be greater or equal than 0, then distance equals negative. It's an OMG case. It cannot happen. So absolute value of x is negative. This only means no, so solutions. Again, regardless of what lies between the absolute values. For example, absolute value of x squared minus 1 equals -3. No solutions. Absolute value of x minus 1 over 2 minus 6x equals -1. No solutions. There will never be any solutions. To recap, we just saw one thing, one definition, and one thing. Keep in mind, absolute value stands for distance, and therefore it's always greater or equal than 0. Absolute value of x equals something positive. You take that something and you make that either equal to that positive or equal to its negative. Absolute value of x equals 0. You take that expression inside and you make that equal to 0. Finally, absolute value of x equals to something negative. No way, no solutions. That will be all for now. Shall you have any questions, please feel free to leave your comment below the video. As always, thank you for watching.